with a 64 present. A Playguide and video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hey there, welcome to another Lemon C64 play guide and review. This week we'll be checking out the US edition of Outrun, released by Sega in 1987. And for this we'll be checking out the cartridge version, which I managed to find on the arcade's compilation number 3, available as a .crt file from the makers at nostalgia.org. So if you want all these games on one cartridge, directly into your C64 or emulator, check out that website, and let's check out the intro and great music as well. As the cartridge loads, we'll find the disc version available to US customers of Outrun. We'll find the traditional European loading screen, and we'll also find the US edition, featuring enhancers Chris Alberth and Lou Hayne. We'll also find a very nice representation of the arcade attraction mode, and I wish that was in the game itself, but unfortunately not. We do, however, gain a map, and from here we can choose any one of the 5 routes available in this game. So let's check out the A route, let's press fire and select the appropriate music, and let's check this game out. As we begin, I noticed a few changes. For one thing, the clouds are slightly better drawn, perhaps, on the US edition, and take a look at the vehicle. We find shades of yellow there, and the girl's hair is now blonde, but the initials have disappeared, and the horse doesn't move either, and that car actually reminds me more of a Toyota 2000 GT convertible from the Bond movie You Only Live Twice, rather than a Ferrari Testarossa, and I find the yellow makes the vehicle look a bit jaundiced. That doesn't help the presentation, but you can see the rest of the game is exactly the same as the European version, apart from maybe the vehicles might change, and the routes and the plant life are exactly the same. You may also notice the banding in the road is slightly wider in the US version, and the road itself has tram lines running down the centre of that, rather than the gaps that we managed to find on the European version. But I think those tweaks have actually speeded up the game, and it feels much smoother than the European version, and slightly faster as well. On top of all that, the sound effects have had a tweak, and now we gain different sound effects. Again, not bad at all, but the music has remained exactly the same throughout. As with the original Outrun, the best tactic is to swerve into those corners early and avoid bumping into the back of those vehicles as much as possible. But unlike the European version, this version is much easier. You'll find fewer cars in the road, and look at that, empty patches with nothing going on, and that means the whole experience is much easier, apart from in the junctions there where, again, the action is packed and things are often frantic. I like the fact that tyre smoke goes green if we wander off that track, and so long as we don't collide with any of those objects, we should be fine. But as we shall see a little later, even crashing out in this version is completely allowed, because this game is slightly easier. But you wouldn't notice that slightly easier in sections like this, and of course if the player can just avoid things and press down that gear just as they're going off, then they should be able to avoid 90% of things, and again gear down to avoid the back of the traffic. That's all we have to do in this game. The rest should be fairly easy. So let's head on now to the next level, and again busy junctions remain the order of the day. with the same track layout following throughout the entire game, stage to stage, level to level. So if you've memorised the Euro version, you'll find fewer cars, and that means the progress can be maintained, and because that graphics engine has been tweaked and slightly more streamlined, I find the game experience is slightly smoother. So as we persevere now through the town and on towards the next level, I really do appreciate the American version, and it's a pity that we didn't get these enhancements in Europe. I'm not sure the order of the releases, maybe they were designed and released concurrently, but I do know that playing this on the cartridge is a novel experience. The loading times are cut down to a very manageable level, and I didn't even know this game existed until a couple of weeks ago when I released the Euro version on the C64 YouTube site, and then I found comments of the US version. I don't even think the US version is listed in the C64 website, which is slightly a shame, but I'm not sure whether this is simply an omission or the fact that no magazine reviewers have actually reviewed it. I definitely find this is an upgrade over the Euro version, except for the fact that the car is slightly flatter and yellower and more jaundiced. As I say, at least they got the colour of the woman's hair right. So colliding into the back of those trucks now, let's check out the end of this A route, stage 5, and the end won't be too far away from here. It's great to see that crowd as we get somewhere near that line, and when we go over that line we'll gain a bonus for the number of seconds remaining. We'll gain 100,000 points, which means every 10 is worth 1 million, so we'll gain 2.7 million on top of our previous score, which gives us 39. So let's check out those high scores on the high score table. Just like the European version, we also get to hear a nice wave effect lapping on the shores of the Commodore 64. And we even see waves there on the map. This version also comes with an accurate representation of the car travelling that distance, a little like the arcade, although we do not get a red line following the car around. It's still great to see that on the Commodore 64, and I'm not quite sure whether that was on the disc version of the European version, but I do know it's present there on the US edition. And if that is a brand new feature that we didn't get to see in Europe, then that's obviously a great feature. Something else you may remember from the original Playguide, I said there were no trucks in this game. Well, in the US they have managed to create a truck, and I guess creating the back end of a truck, which is a square box with a line running down the centre, isn't that hard to create at all. And you may notice other cars, VW Beetles, and the odd Corvette that makes its appearance. So sometimes the traffic does vary in this instance, and well, in the corner there was a slight glitch as the clouds rolled onto that screen and hitting the back of that truck there. So at least there are trucks, they aren't as good as maybe other versions and conversions of this game, and it's not a very great 3D effect either. But you can see bumping our way through to the next section at high speed never gets boring, and it's almost identical at this stage to the Euro version, and we can really get some speed through these corners. Unlike the arcade version, I think the C64 version is slightly easier, not only because of the aspects I've mentioned already, and aspects that I will go on to mention later on, i.e. the time limit is easier, and of course the traffic is less. But apart from that, I find the road meanders much more easy than the arcade version, and the player won't have to gear down so many times either. So as we continue on to the next section, you will see the clock 25 seconds remaining. And again, the floor of this level seems to have taken a hike of the Euro version, i.e. these lines are a little more annoying, and I don't remember those lines being so annoying on the Euro version. actual skidding of our wheels isn't actually as good in the US version and sounds very bad indeed, in fact, and I really don't think they could have got a worse skid if they tried. The bumping is quite okay, and the rest of the sound effects and of course the music is fine, but the engine sound, as we shall see later on, is not. But as we move on to yet another dire banded level, I think this may be supposedly a marsh, but I'm not quite sure. Looks like we are travelling over an infinite supply of rivers here at the moment, and things that look like they should be in the desert. But you can see there, this graphical update is slightly different, and in some cases it's better, but in this case the planting is actually worse. You can still see the cars jumping over the horizon, and that's great. And another great aspect of this game is the time limit is so vast that the player can actually have offs in this game, and depending on the track we choose, we may be able to sustain 2, maybe even 3 complete offs and still continue to the end. This may be a miracle to users of the Euro version, where absolutely 1 off would mean catastrophe, absolutely, and in this version it seems to be much easier. Let's put that into practice, let's crash, and let's see if we still make it. Outrun the US edition was co-coded by Chris Oberth, and Chris Oberth started on the C64 with Ardy the Aardvark in 1983 for Data East. The other co-coder was Lou Hain, and they both worked on Willow, the Lucasfilm game created under the Mindscape banner on the C64 in 1988. And the very low rated Willow, by all accounts, only got 3 out of 10 on the 1164 database. But those guys did work together and still went on in the business. Meanwhile, back on the C64, it looks like we're on stage 5, and the crowd gives away the fact that we've made it. So we did make it after all, with 22 seconds remaining, and you may be surprised to learn that despite that major off, we've not only gained a huge number of credits and points in the bank, but we've actually gained the highest high score as well. And so let's check that out. Even though this map transition is a great effect, I feel it's a pity that the car doesn't actually go to the last checkpoint and stops at checkpoint 4 in every single case, and then skips on. So unfortunately the car doesn't drive even to the end of the course depicted on the map. Let's try again with the C route. The route is the final route that we shall take a look at in this play guide, basically because the routes are identical to the Euro version. Comparing the two, I actually prefer the Euro Ferrari. The squashed Ferrari in the US edition looks a little bit like a shopping trolley and a Mazda MX-5, but apart from the main sprite, I think the other cars, the Corvette and the trucks and all the other additions are great, and even the clouds there are a great improvement, although they could have been slightly bigger on the horizon. You can see everything is maintained in both versions, and while the American version is easier, unfortunately there was something to be said for not crashing out in the Euro version, and if the player can crash out in the US version and still make it, then what is the point? Certainly Outrun in the arcades was a definite hit or miss affair, and if you do not hit anything then you might get through to the end, and if you do then you'll miss that opportunity. So this isn't quite like Outrun in the arcades. Not only are the tracks absolutely not similar in the slightest, but also it is so much easier with the traffic and the time. So I do recommend the US version over the Euro version, but only because it is smoother and seems to maintain the speed. Everything else is slightly against, because the easiness, although it is better than the absolute nightmare of the Euro version, maybe it is too easy. And as we move on to complete the third stage on and run, and don't forget this is the very first time I've actually seen this game. I actually recorded my experience, and this is my experience from the very first time, and as you will see, I went on to complete the first 3 stages in a row. So when I finally did that, I didn't bother completing stages D and E, knowing that those would be probably easy as well. And hence my score for this game is slightly higher than the 6 out of 10 that I gave the original, mainly because of those factors. So I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10, and the thing which saves it from being a 7 is the fact that it is too easy to continue and survive. This takes away a certain degree of hostility from this game, but again, if it is too easy to complete, then anyone can do this blindfold. And compared to the Euro version, that's completely the opposite. So I do have mixed feelings about the US edition, having just experienced it for the very first time. I think they have improved some things, but unfortunately they have not improved others. Does this game still stand up after 26 years? Yes, for a 26-year-old game, this is not bad at all. It is certainly better than some of the other conversions out there, and I have experienced some of the weaker conversions of this game. My all-time favourite is of course the arcade coin-op original, and I have that of course on MAME to this day. But to my mind, the Amiga version was a port of the ST version, and they were both terrible, and the ZX Spectrum version and the Amstrad CPC weren't too bad. There was also great conversions for the Sega Mega Drive as well, because this is a Sega game. Of course they will put all their effort into that, although I still think the C64 versions, both of those, are valiant efforts. After all this driving and comparing the two, I would not recommend these games to a modern games player, although to a games player like me they definitely do stand up over 26 years. And having seen the vast improvements of racing games over these 26 years, I can only imagine what they will look like in 26 years' time. And that's almost the end of this Playguide and review. There isn't much to add to the Euro version Playguide except for the fact that there are graphics and sound changes. And the colour schemes with this blood red isn't amazing, but then again they have tweaked a few things in this game. So let's go ahead and complete that C route, and let's see how much score we gain after all that. Like the Euro version, I don't think we can quit directly to the high scores with the fire button. I think we just have to wait for that to happen, and that is another change from the Euro version. But you can see we did not crash in the C route, we did not crash in the A route, but we did crash in the B route, and the B route still remains the top of our particular high score table. So let's follow that car all the way across there, up to stage 4 again. And before we leave this Playguide and review completely, let's just select the game again and give a listen to those sound effects. Unfortunately, the sound effect of the engine noise sounds more like a vacuum cleaner or maybe a tumble dryer rather than a Ferrari. And if that was the best sound effect they could cram out of the C64, then I'm afraid they wasted their time, because this is very feeble indeed and really ruins the gameplay of this game. Apart from that, I really did enjoy discovering this game for the very first time. And thanks of course to the guys on YouTube who left me the comments about the US edition in the first place. Thank you, and see you soon.